bop bop, babadoo bop, bop 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 bop bop.
They act like they own something just cause they keep it in the constant motion. Dedicated to the action, that's the positive in my marketing promotion. You keep hoping that the slip on the road is shit. You claim there ain't either in the wheelchair, the less man standing. Who the man with CP and whatnot. Trees have the longest hell, they heat to make the sun hot. Lyrical, global, conglomerate on the low, bruh. You a 50-degree Jedi, I'm the one to train Yoda. Watch yourself, soldier. These IEDs kneecap your paragraphs. My biometrics, death to skate the septics with the verbiage that's energetic. So, once again, they got to put you up on the game. The hip-hop master artist, and you ain't like you in a title belt. You're not even the worst sparring.
Bop bop bop, babadoo bop, 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 bop bop bop.
From Tunisia's to Mali to Macon to versatile. Push line, bomb mines, under the name do live. Just a tap on my pen touches the bottom of the Mariana's trench. No mistake, the CP is far from the flinch. Dude live metaphors are Titanic. Off speak clean puff, I speak dominant, crush the granite. See us there to keep you under pressure on time immemorial. Things before them. Footprints all over your ass, blade attached to the fast rate in the best case scenario. I rock the favelas, burials, suburbs in the ghettos, mangas in the moccasins, ice skates or stilettos. With the pandemonium, the crowd breaks in the pandemonium. So over them, woe under them, claim bandit folded him iconic. You basic and moronic. Come on, man.
Bop bop bop, babadoo bop, 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 bop bop bop, babadoo bop.
We knew that hip-hop endurance was secure. Those crap technicians get the brain structure pure with creative latitude. From underground to high altitude, practitioners never lose sight of the gratitude needed to remain undefeated like feces. Believe the skills needed, kid, better eat your Wheaties and your vitamins. Bottom line, I analyze your precepts and concepts, no mishaps or missteps. Done by eye, this whole touch, I remember holidays in Bed-Stuy. Traveling the river late till this day, I get a rush. When the beat get turned up, get high, when the trees get burnt up. And there's no hope bar, you can't hold these mean 16 white hot balls. Interwoven with the intense, intricate motion, get your body and your mind open.
Bop bop bop, babadoo bop, 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 bop bop bop, babadoo bop.
Hello and a very warm welcome to the brand new SIGA Wow Show, Women on Wednesdays, brought to you by SIGA, the world's leading organisation for sport integrity. On the first Wednesday of every month, SIGA showcases the thought leadership initiatives spearheaded by female execs, senior industry leaders, sportswomen and influencers who will address from a female lens the most critical integrity challenges facing contemporary sports. This third episode is dedicated to the power of Paralympics and features inspirational senior executives, including April Holmes, the Paralympic gold medalist, plus co-founder and CEO of Hero Hangout, Candace Cable, a 9-time Winter and Summer Paralympian, plus Vice President of the US International Council on Disabilities. Furthermore, we've got Karen Korb, the Paralympic champion at wheelchair tennis, plus member of the Congressional Commission. All of this, as ever, brilliantly presented by SIGA's global COO and managing director of the SIGA Women Programme, our very own Katie Simmons. Stay tuned as our guests discuss their career journeys, integrity issues at the heart of sport, inclusion, and so much more. We're ready for SIGA Wow. Over to you, Katie.
Hello everyone, welcome to the third episode of SIGA Wow, and we're all dancing away to Ba 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 Bada Boo Bop. More on that, because for this episode we're bringing music and sport together. Both have the power to change. Welcome to this third episode, Women on Wednesdays. This show is dedicated to celebrating and empowering women in sport. As you all know, I'm Katie Simmons. I'm the Global COO of SIGA, and I'm Managing Director of the SIGA Women Programme. Now, SIGA Wow is designed to be different. So if you're fed up with your average webinar, look no further. On the first Wednesday of every month, we invite female leaders to join us, the movers and shakers in the industry, to share their insights on how we can move the needle and create greater opportunities for women in sport in relation to diversity and inclusion too, whether it's from the boardroom to the field of play. This is thought leadership at its very best, with monthly features including gift giveaways. And stay tuned for the chance to win unique items from the 2004 Athens Paralympic Games and the recent LA bid. We have a career corner packed with tips and advice on how to wow, interactive questions from our global audience, and our Man of the Month and SIGA Champion of the Month. So stay tuned for those. Thank you for tuning into this third episode, which is dedicated to the power of Paralympics. And on Monday this week, it marked the 50 days to go till the Paralympic Games, and we're fully revved up and ready to be amazed by the incredible achievements of the athletes that will break records in Tokyo 2020. So without further ado, let's key up the next video, which is the video about the 50 days to go, courtesy of the International Paralympic Committee, so we remember what we've got in store in the next 50 days. Here it comes. With an impressive collection of medals and more achievements than I have time to mention. First up, we've got April Holmes, Paralympic gold medalist, co-founder and CEO of Hero Hangout. And just some of her career highlights include working with Michelle Obama on the Let's Move campaign. We have Candace Cable, 9-time winter and summer Paralympian, Vice President of the US International Council on Disabilities, who just got inducted in the Olympic and Paralympic Hall of Fame. And last but not least, it's Karen Korb, my sister from another mister. She's a Paralympic champion for wheelchair tennis. She's member of the Congressional Commission for Empowering Olympics and Paralympics Act. She's a SIGA champion, SIGA committee member, and all-round New Jersey goddess. When I speak to these women, there's several things they have in common. And it's not just the fact that they're women, that they're Paralympian athletes, or they're American. They've got one common feature, is that they're three of the most powerful female leaders in sport that I've had the pleasure of meeting, and they're breaking multiple boundaries for gender, for race, and for inclusion. And they're all passionate about leaving a legacy for the next generation of leaders. You can ask us their questions, hashtag SIGA Wow. It's interactive. Send your questions to the live chat. Follow us at SIGA Alliance, hashtag SIGA Women, hashtag SIGA Wow. And today's wow is extremely poignant, Preparing for it has led me to question my own bias and dismantle stigmas about disability. And I invite you as the viewers to join me on this journey in getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Face your fears on disability as we bring the I from R-E-D&I into central focus. Because often when we talk about diversity and inclusion, inclusion is the poorer relation. So volume up, don't touch that dial. Are you ready? Now is the time to wow. Welcome to Women on Wednesdays, Karen, April, and Candice. Let's give it up for our wonderful guests. I'm going to start by asking you all to share your powerful stories on the moment you decided to become Paralympians and what sport means to you, starting with Karen.
Katie, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction for all of us. And there are so many powerful women with disabilities in sport. And I just want to very quickly, my pronouns are she, her, hers. My image description, I am a disabled white woman. I'm a wheelchair user. And I'm also at this time recognizing that I am an uninvited guest on the Muncie Lenape lands of New Jersey and showing my deep reverence for the Muncie Lenape people. So, to answer your question, I did not begin my tennis career thinking that I'm going to be a Paralympian, because back in the day, that just was not at the forefront of the conversation. As I began playing wheelchair tennis, I remember thinking with a lot of support, with a lot of community support, a lot of player support, I thought to myself, if I can manage things well, like training, nutrition, the psychology, the money, the travel, if I set up my environment for success, winning matches, accruing points, traveling the globe, and if I stayed healthy, then maybe I would have an opportunity to be in that top 24, because we have a 32 women's draw, and maybe my ranking would be high enough that I could qualify, because that's the big thing. Not everybody gets to go, right? You have to qualify, and that is so incredibly hard. And once I was moving up the ladder, so to speak, it started to become real for me. And I was like, oh my God, maybe I will be a Paralympian. And so that's the brief version of my story. So,
Karen, Is it true that you hadn't picked up a racket before?
No, I was not a tennis player. I don't like tennis, which is the irony of all of this. I find tennis to be a very bougie sport. But a friend recommended it, and we played, and there's a whole long story to that. But I fell in love with it. But more so, I fell in love with the culture and the community of tennis players, wheelchair tennis players to be specific, because I was embraced and I was part of a different culture that I had since the onset of my disability at the age of 17, that I did not want to be a part of this group. And sport brought me into this fold in a very different way. And I will be forever grateful for my mentors in this sport for bringing me to where I am now.
Candice, over to you. Tell us about your story that brought to you winning all those medals.
Well, thank you, Katie. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Oh, okay, because I was playing around with my microphone.
Play away.
Don't put a shiny object in front of me. Okay. So for me, I also want to introduce myself a little bit. My pronouns are she and her. And my audio description is that I'm a Caucasian woman with silver chin length hair and black glasses, rimmed glasses on, and a black turtleneck on. And behind me is a wall in my apartment building that's got a couple of books, Disability, Visibility, and We Are More Than Organs, are really important books that I think that everyone should have on their shelves. So if the audience wants to go have a look, they're great resources to begin your journey into disability. And I'm like Karen, I didn't grow up thinking about being a Paralympian. In fact, I grew up a non-disabled person in the 50s and 60s in Southern California. I was running around my school, having fun, but I was not an athlete. I did not enjoy athletics at all. I didn't love any of the confrontation that came with it. I was really involved in my neighborhood and my community, and I had a lot of advantages as a white person growing up in Southern California in a middle-class family At the age of 21 in 1975, I had a spinal cord injury that changed everything. Before that, I thought that every opportunity I could take advantage of. And after it, I felt isolated and alone, excluded. I was angry. I really thought my life was over and that I would spend my life in an institution. And I know that sounds really dramatic, but I'd never seen anyone with a disability before. I'd never, ever even thought about it. And I think one of the reasons why I didn't is because oftentimes we don't see disabled people because they've been put away or we've been eradicated in some way. So for me, I had to get into therapy to really figure out how I was going to redefine myself. I got into the university and disabled student services was happening. And that is where I found my community. And that is what got me into sport because they were all involved with some different sports. One was tennis, just being invented in the 70s. And I didn't like chasing that little ball around at all. I tried it. I was like, nah. But wheelchair racing was being invented. And I gravitated towards it because we went into a 10K in our little everyday chairs that were 50-pound stainless steel Evereston Jennings chairs. And we went across the same start line as the runners, the same course as the runners, and the same finish line. And I felt inclusion there. And that's when I started to think about sport as a real opportunity for me to build my community, but also get stronger. And then someone talked about the Paralympics. And that I might have a
really nicely, April, to Candice, to April. April, your story, amazing to hear how we had so many non-sporty people and now you're all champions. What's yours?
Mine was actually started in sport as a result of not really liking baton, not liking ballet, and not liking piano lessons. My mother had this thing that if you keep kids busy, they'll stay out of trouble. And as a result, I was in everything and anything. I think if there was a basket weaving class, she would have probably had us in basket weaving also. But I found track and field at a very young age. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and my uncle had was starting a track team in the inner city. And so I convinced my mom, let me go out there, let me try it. I absolutely loved it. I was running track all through since from young age all the way through college. And I about 5 years after I graduated from Norfolk State University, I actually got into a train accident and lost my left leg below my knee as a result of the train accident. And I was devastated, having played basketball, having ran track all my life, wasn't running or playing basketball at the time. I was just working. However, as I sat there in that hospital bed, one of the first questions I asked after the train accident was, what happened to my leg? And I remember telling my cousin or asking my cousin and asking my mom, I said, you mean to tell me I'll never be able to run or play basketball again? And they just kept saying to me, you'll be okay, you'll be fine. And I was so very fortunate that the doctor that did my surgery, he came in a few days after my surgery and gave me some magazines about the Paralympics. And when I first looked at the magazines, I thought the man was crazy. I'm like, why is this guy handing me magazines? It's such a random thing for a doctor to hand you some magazines. But nevertheless, I realized now and then even that those magazines actually saved my life. They introduced me to Paralympics, and they put me on a journey where I set 3 dreams for myself that I wanted to represent the United States at the next Paralympic Games. I wanted to be the fastest amputee in the world, and I wanted to win gold medals. And I'd been doing those and had a very, very successful career doing all 3 of those things. And I tell you, I would never have imagined when I was younger running around track that, later on in my life that I would be an amputee, that I would have a disability. But I can sure tell you it has sure added plenty of highlights to my life, just living this life that I have now.
Thank you, April. Absolutely. Just words can't express the courage, but also the power of your story. And I think that, what I'd like to put this all into context. And when I spoke to Candice last week, we discussed the history and the oppression of disability. And some words really haunted me, Candice. You said the world was built without us. I've only got a very short time, but could you, in 2 minutes, explain a history of the disabled civil rights in America, as I was shocked by the level of oppression for people with disability?
Oh, thanks, Katie. And right, 2 minutes, not enough, but we're going to give you the cliff notes here. So I like to say disabled people didn't come out until the mid 20th century, because before that we were either institutionalized or eradicated, as my dear friend Keith Jones likes to say. And so you didn't see us. That's why the world was built without us. And there's so much intergenerational and transgenerational trauma that people with disabilities continue to hold on to because of all of that loss of exposure to the human world. My first Paralympic Games was in 1980. Those games were held in Moscow, and they were going to hold the Olympic and Paralympic Games in the same place. They were starting to do that. The Soviets said, we don't have disabled people. This was 1980, and we're not going to hold the Paralympic Games. So let's just think about our rights, our civil rights, our human rights. Well, human rights were our human rights documents for the UN came about in 1948. Disabled people were left out of those documents. In the United States, our civil rights documents came forwards in the 1960s. Disabled people were again left out of those documents. In 1973, a document was written called the Rehabilitation Act 504, which said that any federally funded program, building, or foundation had to be accessible to disabled people, but there were no regulations written. So what happened was disabled people 4 years later took over a federal building, the longest takeover ever of a federal building in the United States, and got those regulations written. That led to 1990. 1990 was the very first year in the United States that people with disabilities had a civil rights law. And in 2008, the Convention on Rights for Persons with Disabilities was written at the UN to begin to support and create human rights for people with disabilities. So 2008, the UN and the Sustainable Development Goals that we have, the 1530 goals that are coming up, we now have disabled people mentioned 11 times in 17 goals. We're moving forward, but it definitely isn't fast enough.
1990, 2008, all within all our lifetimes here. I was born in 1982. It's shocking. Karen, picking up on this, previously disabled people have been marginalized, hidden and shunned. We've spoken about that. And non-disabled people often use the excuse that it costs too much to cater, to include. It's just too hard to make that exception. I think it's time to educate. Can you explain to our audience the curb cut effect? Because this was new to me.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And high five, Candace, on that under 2-minute explanation. I'm so impressed. But the curb cut effect was a journal article written by Angela Glover Blackwell, who's the CEO and founder of PolicyLink. It is an organization that is laser focused on equity. And she wrote this article entitled Curb Cut Effect. And I encourage everyone in our audience to read it. And the essence of the article, it's not a long article, but the essence of the article is literally when you center and prioritize disability in planning and design, those areas are appreciated by everyone. And it's also known here in the States as universal design. And if you think about curb cuts on the sidewalks, a lot, they weren't here. They weren't here forever, by the way. So there's another historic piece on this. But when you think about that curb cut on the side of the road, on the corner, it makes it easier for pushing people, pushing strollers, people with rolling bags and luggage, skateboarders, street vendors with their carts, and the list goes on and on. And most people don't know how much disability innovation drives our entire global society. But most people just don't know that because we are not highlighted as a population within these conversations. So also the history piece, the historic piece about curb cuts is back in 1980, and Candace talked about this briefly, disabled people in Denver, they staged a protest to demand curb cuts on the side of the road. And they literally took sledgehammers and hammered the sides of the roads to create their own curb cuts. So think about that, 1980, we still didn't have curb cuts. So if your sidewalks aren't in order and you don't have curb cuts, like someone with a mobility impairment specifically, because I'm only speaking from someone who's a wheelchair user perspective, I mean, you can't even cross the street I mean, Candace and I were talking about that the other day. Like, you have to, get off on a driveway, and then you roll in the road, hope you don't die, and then find another driveway to get onto the other side of the street. So, the human rights of people with disability or disabled people is too often relegated to a cost-benefit analysis. And so, to answer the actual question, creating access isn't more work. It feels like more work because the people that are building the areas, they cut corners in the first place. They didn't include. So if you include at the onset, in the beginning, when you're programming and planning, then you will intentionally include.
Very eloquently put, Karen, and that's what we're urging all of the leaders watching the show to do in sport and the wider world. I want to go to April now. April, you've achieved more than most people do in a lifetime. What are the biggest barriers you faced as a disabled athlete and subsequently as a female leader in sport? And how have you overcome these?
I think I want to play a little bit off of what Karen was talking about is, the phenomenon of what if we do or what if we don't. It's almost like we're going to push this button and make this happen, or we're not going to push this button and make it happen. Because so many of us, as past several years of our lives have been, okay, why can't this happen for people with disabilities? And for myself, I mean, even as I was training and things like that, I never wanted to just train with Paralympic athletes. I wanted to be included. I wanted to train every single day with Olympic athletes. Why? They were faster. Why? That's the environment I was used to. And so the difference for me is I just got a few extra minutes in between sessions that, I have to be able to pause and wipe off my leg. But other than that, I mean, that was an advantage for me because I got a few extra minutes to rest in between sets at practice. And so I used that to my advantage as best as possible. However, me including myself in certain engagements and me including myself in different practices and environments around other athletes gave them also a chance to see that, hey, this here, she's an athlete. She's an athlete at the end of the day. We're not looking at her like she has a disability. And the interesting part is I just come back from the Paralympic trials out in Minnesota. A lot of the same things were happening. People are beginning to see the athleticism. People are beginning to see the possibilities. People are beginning to see that inclusion should be part of it, not excluded. No one should be excluded from things. It should be we're including them no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, no matter how much money it takes. We're going to include them because if we include them today, then that takes us away from having to do so many other things like take a hammer and bust up some curbs later. Just include today, and then we don't have to worry about it tomorrow. Then it becomes part of your everyday life as opposed to not.
Include today. I think that's the call to action from this WOW webinar. How do we dispel, Karen, the myths created by non-disabled people that we shouldn't create greater access and opportunity? And what is SIGA doing to help?
Well, there's quite a few myths, and let me address what SIGA is doing to help. First of all, representation matters, and having a position on the GRID committee. And for those of you in the audience who don't know what GRID is, it's the Gender, Race, Inclusion, and Diversity Committee on a global stage. And often, someone with a disability is often placed on a committee who might be tokenized. However, if that is the case, which wasn't the case here, if that is the case, then you need to take your lane as a disabled person, do your work, learn about everything that you possibly can about that representation, and you hold that lane. And then when it's time to move out of the lane and bring more people in, i.e. our panel here today, that is critically important to success. And also SIGA has universal standards. And I know as we were developing those universal standards, I was very much part of that conversation. And if I'm part of the conversation, I'm bringing another 100 people with me into that conversation. So it's not always the Karen Korb show. So diversity and inclusion is representative because disabled people aren't a monolith. We come in so many different shapes and sizes, color, all of the things. So if I'm speaking, sometimes I'm only representing my experience. And I will always defer to someone else with their experience. And so we also know as disabled people, the biases that we encounter, those myths, right? You call them biases. And they create a ton of discrimination. And disabled people often know that, we have to be a certain level of perfect to literally deserve basic respect. And sometimes we internalize that as ableism. I know we'll talk about that a little bit later. But for me, it's always about bringing the truth forward. And that is really hard sometimes. Co-creating lanes for other people to bring forward their truths, and what are their lived experiences. And, we all know the places that we are, let's say, proverbially pretending just so we can keep the temperature stable in the room that somebody else wants us to keep, right? These are the power dynamics that we're always working with, under, around, for. I just, in my own career, in my own life, I simply stopped pretending and began elevating truth.
Elevating truth, Karen. While we're on the subject of truth, let's ask people for your giveaway question, and if they know the true answer.
Yeah, let's talk about that giveaway question. All right. So I've got a really cool jacket from the 2004 Paralympic Games. To date, who is described as the greatest wheelchair tennis player of all time? Is it Esther Vergeer from the Netherlands? Is it David Hall from Australia? Is it Randy Snow from the United States of America? Or is it Yui Kamiji from Japan?
Brilliant. Send your answers in the live chat. First one will win the cool jacket. I thought it was you, Karen. Moving to Candice now. I think one of the things when I've thought about this topic is that actually disability, it's a human experience at some point in our lives we're all going to go through. In fact, some go through it younger than others, but it's called getting old. And for some, it might be for wearing glasses, hearing failing. Others, it's their limbs. Certainly, my husband, every time he gets out of bed, hurts his back in the morning. How can we adequately address people's deeply ignorant and apathetic view? And how do we dismantle ableism on a global stage? Because I think whether we like it or not, those of us do see from our own prisms. And I think this topic, more than any other WOW, has really challenged that. And I'd love to hear your views on that.
Thank you. Well, the short answer is we have to dismantle racism first. And, because I heard Rebecca Coakley, the program officer for the Ford Foundation in the Office of the President, they're developing a U.S. disability rights program strategy, the first of its kind, say, racism and ableism are the roots of the same tree. They come together. And I think we have to start with really understanding what the definition of ableism is. And T.L. Lewis has the best that around. And I'm going to read it for everyone because ableism, a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societal constructed ideas of normality, intelligence, excellence, desirability, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Black, eugenics, misogyny, colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. This form of systemic oppression leads to people and society determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's language, appearance, religion, and or their disability to satisfactorily reproduce, produce, excel, and behave. And you don't have to be disabled to experience ableism. When I think about sport, I have to say the nature of the beast is internalized ableism, and it's a necessary part of that game, but it's only for the game. We need to leave it on the field. We intentionally have to have purpose in dismantling our own internalized ableism by really looking at it and connecting with people that aren't like us, listening to what the needs are, and as Karen says, centering the most marginalized people when we're building any type of inclusion and access. And I want to also mention that inclusion isn't access. They're two different things, but we need both. And we have to examine and then change the cultures that we have been adhering to for ages and ages.
Thank you for that really great summary. And I think that leads really nicely to a question to April on her views on how we can change this culture. Firstly, in terms of inclusion, but also picking up on what you mentioned, Candice, on access. And I love the terminology Karen uses, which is leadership lanes. How do we create all those three and also make sports organizations accountable for it?
There are so many opportunities for athletes and people with disabilities. If you understand that they also have a brain, I'll call it, because as strange as this conversation may sound, it's some people are like, okay, because they have a disability, they don't have a brain. Because they have a disability, they're not capable of having an education. Because they have a disability, they're not capable of ... And so, bringing these people to the table with disabilities, to the table where everyone else sits, opens up and sparks a conversation, which kind of leads into what Candice was talking about. Even as we deal with racism around the world, and strangely enough, that we continue to deal with racism around the world is the same manner in which we continue to deal with disabilities around the world. It's, bring people to the table, have the conversations, and don't be afraid to have the conversations, but also opening up your mind and opening up your ears so that you can hear someone else's perspective. Because until you bring people of the very diverse backgrounds to a table to have a conversation, you have no clue what they feel. You have no clue how they feel. You have no clue even how they live until you actually hear them speak about their experiences. And so I think one of my favorite songs is like, experience is a great teacher, because, when you open up your eyes, when you open up your ears, when you open up your mind, you'll be surprised, some of the things that you'll learn as a result. And as far as leadership is concerned, I believe in some ways leadership has begun taking that step. And in other ways, leadership is way, way, way too slow taking these particular steps as it relates to people with disabilities. And so I think it's interesting that the three of us on this call, that you have as panelists on this call, we've lived lives that we were not disabled, and we've lived lives that we were. And so, for us to continue to push the envelope, because we understand, for us to continue to push the envelope because we're not afraid, and because for us to continue to push the envelope because we're literally saying enough is enough. We refuse to continue to be mistreated. We refuse to continue to be unheard. We continue to refuse to be not included in things. And the more and more people such as ourselves, really fight this battle that we demand to be included, the more and more we're like, we're not allowing you to exclude us from everything that you're talking about. And, you begin to see it more and more. I mean, I turn the television on, more and more you begin to see people with disabilities. You have panel discussions like this, more and more you begin to see people with disabilities, because we demand to be heard. We demand to be seen. We demand to have an impact in this world, because we also have a purpose. We also have goals. We also have dreams. We also have feelings. We also have family. And the more and more we continue to push this, the more and more it's not even just about us. It's about, it's about the injustices that have happened prior to us, the injustices that are happening now. And our hope and our prayer is that the injustices don't continue to happen tomorrow.
Let's talk about representation for the Paralympics. Are disabled people adequately represented in the decision making on how the games is run? Who wants to take that question? Some smiles all round. Shall I pick somebody? April?
I mean, I'll take a stab. I'll take a real quick. I mean, we talked about, or this week was the big announcement, 70% of Channel 4's TV hosts are going to be disabled for the Tokyo Paralympics, So a lot of the discussion is around, okay, so that's great. What if we were also hosts for the Olympic Games? Have we thought about that level of equity? And so as we move into these conversations and change, really, what is the root cause of why we're not included, right? And so it's important not to continue to tokenize or band-aid the overarching issue of discriminatory employment practices. So we're thinking about representation and employment, because that is global. And also, The disabled population or people with disabilities comprise 1 billion people globally. And in the United States, it's 20% of our population. So there's some incredible impact. And so what I would recommend is that we need to be in human resources leadership. We need to be doing the hiring. People who have disabilities, who have expansive knowledge, not just about disability, but about justice. And I would also add that human resources professionals and all of leadership in organizations and corporations need to have core competencies around disability and all different types of disabilities. Something that I do personally to create that pipeline is I keep a running file on women and men with disabilities. I keep all of their resumes. And so creating my own talent pipeline. So when I have these lanes and people ask me, like, who do you know that has X, Y, and Z? I can immediately go into my pipeline file and say, you know what? I think X, Y, and Z would be a great fit for your organization or your company. So we are still at a level where those of us with disabilities who are in leadership lanes are creating our own pipelines to bring other talented disabled people forward.
And I just want to add to that in that education. Get yourself educated, people, on disability and all the ins and outs of it, the different types of disabilities, the language that we use. We use 2 different ways to refer to ourselves: people with disabilities or disabled people. One's a form of identity. The other is person first. Learn how we operate. Spend time with us. It's about awareness, but it's also about understanding, because we have to be, as Karen was saying, we have to be in decision-making positions.
I think one of the questions that I'd like to pose, which is rhetorical, which percentage of disabled people are hosting the Olympics? We've got the other. We're celebrating that 70% of disabled people are hosting the Paralympics. Why not 90%? And are 10% or 30% of disabled people hosting the Olympics? Because that, to me, would be a pari passu for inclusion. I want to move on now there's a topic that came up in the last episode of WOW, which was the unlocking of revenue and unbundling of media rights for the Paralympics. What's your opinion on that? Asking April, Karen.
Oh, well, this is Candace. I'm just going to say one thing. I would love the Paralympics to stop trying to be like the Olympics. I want them to run their lane. I want them to pull everything out and build on disability and build on Paralympic sport, because sport is sport. Of course, we know that. And it's a great friendly face, and it's a way to open a door to a harder conversation. But disabled people have a lot more to offer than just sport. And I think the Paralympic committees, I think the Paralympic organizations, I think everyone involved with sport has a real missed opportunity here to really build on the uniqueness.
Does anyone else want to chime in on that? If not, I'll go to the next question.
Candace, I think if Paralympic athletes were being treated equally and fair, then I'd be all for, okay, have a separate lane for Olympics and have a separate lane for Paralympics. But we all know that that's not the case. And we all know that they're not being treated the same. They're not given the same opportunities. They're not given the same sponsorships. They're not given the same, sometimes even not even given the same facilities. I know even with COVID, so many Paralympic athletes struggle to find races that they can get into. They struggle with finding, facilities that they can access as a result of COVID. And so once they got to their respective trials this year, it was a matter of, I haven't even had a track to train on. I haven't even had a gym to be able to go into. I haven't even had this. So they've had to improvise by staying outside, trying to find a local park. And for visually impaired people to have to go to a park and try and run in a park or try and do different things in the park, it was very difficult. Even as we look at future rollouts of things for, the way Paralympic athletes will be treated as well as Olympic athletes will be treated, there's a disparaging difference that's happening. I know with the Team USA family experience that just became unveiled. the Olympic athletes' families are being given an opportunity to go to Universal Studios in Florida and spend 5 days there, and have all these hosting experiences and things like that. Go to theme parks, and the Paralympic experience. No disrespect to the people in Colorado Springs because they're awesome, but that's where they're sending the Paralympic athletes' families. So if you think here, on one hand, there are some people going. The Olympic athletes are going to Universal Studios in Florida, and the Paralympic athletes' families are going to Colorado Springs. That doesn't seem pretty fair to me. So, I mean, it doesn't affect my family at the end of the day. However, the daily challenges that families and caregivers of athletes and people with disabilities go through is way more intense on a daily basis than that of which maybe an Olympic athlete family may have to go through. And so to know that Olympic athletes are going to basically Disney World or Universal Studios in Florida, and the Paralympic athletes families are getting a tour around the training center in Colorado Springs, that seems a little different to me. So I'm all about inclusion as long as being separate as long as we're equal. But if you can't treat us equally because you have to have two separate events, then bring us together and put on one big event. That's my philosophy.
I think that's an excellent point. And on that, April, you've been obviously a gold medalist champion, and you've been sponsored by BMW amongst other leading brands. The list of sponsors you have are amazing, and that you work within your own agency as well. Can you explain the motivations behind their sponsorship and explain why several global sponsors have decided to change the way they're supporting Paralympians to ensure the money is paid directly to them?
I have had some amazing sponsors over the course of my career, from the Jordan brand to BMW to Deloitte to 24-Hour Fitness. I mean, just amazing sponsors. And they always made me feel like I was included. They always brought me in on the conversations. They always invited me to different events. And so they understood early on the impact that having, that representing their entire customer base, that representing their entire employee base. They understood that early on because they weren't afraid to put people with disabilities to the forefront and including them in their commercial ads, including them in their events, things like that. And so it's interesting because as we talked about C4 earlier, I remember as an athlete just being in the village and we couldn't wait to turn on C4 in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, like late night, everything, because they understood early on, like this is what a broadcast should look like for people with disabilities and for Paralympics. This is what it should look like. And I noticed even here in the United States, as time is going on, NBC has increased the number of hours that they're actually broadcasting the Paralympic Games. So there's progress being made. There's plenty of Olympic sponsors now or USOPC sponsors, shall I say, now that include athletes with disabilities, and there's like Paralympic athletes, and sometimes just as many Paralympic athletes are on their respective sponsorship teams as Olympic athletes are. And so the fact that there's progress being made, some may say it's too slow. But I'm at a phase now and to just congratulate the fact that it is happening. Do we need to grow faster and broader? Sure. But the fact that it is happening, I applaud those companies who say, yes, we are definitely going to sponsor Paralympic athletes alongside of Olympic athletes. But I think the question you asked earlier, Katie, in regards to how many Paralympic athletes are broadcasting the Olympic Games, I think the answer is 0.
Really? Candice, can you tell us more? I know you've worked with Toyota. We didn't manage to play the video, and I want to get to some of the questions we've received from people all around the world. But what about Toyota? How have they changed their sponsorship of the athletes to ensure the money goes directly to them? Can we pick up on that?
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to go back to April also. April, I wasn't talking about the Paralympic Games being separated from the Olympic Games. That contract where they're in the same host cities and the countries and the venues is critical. It's critical, but that the Paralympic brand needs to define itself in a much more individual way away from the Olympic brand, because we're not Olympians. And I personally don't think we should ever strive to be Olympians. I think the diversity of it is critical in what we have in our society and culture. And one of the really exciting things that Toyota is doing is they decided that they want to create a new definition of what mobility means, mobility for everyone. And so Toyota International has been working on that for a while now, and they started to sponsor Paralympic athletes. Well, in this new campaign, they decided they were doing something, and they didn't call it this when we were all in the advisory with them on it. They didn't call it, but I see it as a form of reparations, a type of reparations, because in the United States, they will be sponsoring every single American athlete that makes the U.S. team. And that is something that we've never seen before. And it creates a narrative around different types of reasons why this is a critical piece of leveling up, making sure that as we rise up, we're leveling everyone up. So what Toyota is doing is really focusing on the Paralympic brand and trying to expand that as far as they possibly can, because then they want to create this level field here. When we have our athletes, our Olympic athletes and our Paralympic athletes working together in raising and changing our culture. So if anyone has a chance to see that video, it's a great start. And I'm looking forward to a lot more in the future from them, because they really do want to change what mobility means. And when we all move together, we all have something.
We'll try and play the video at the end, Candice, as we're running out of time here. But I do agree that global brands do have the power to move the needle when it comes to these issues. That's why SIGA is a global coalition. We're membership based, and we do have brands within our membership. Would love to have a conversation and engage Toyota at a future WOW. I think the next WOW is going to be on global sponsorship, and our member MasterCard will appear. So big up Ali at MasterCard. If you're watching, I know you're coming to London soon, and we'll be in quarantine whilst you prepare for the Opens. Now, moving along now to our career corner, where we ask, who wants to pick that one up from Maureen?
Oh, this is Candice. I'll start. So for me, I embrace change. And when I was leaving Paralympic sport, I thought that I was ready. And I realized about a year and a half out that I was really committed to the identity of being an athlete, and that I needed to get some help with that. And so I went into therapy and started to figure out new tools that I could use to redefine who I was. Same thing I did after my spinal cord injury. And my focus is always around embracing that change and working with the flow of it, and then educating myself.
Karen?
Yeah, I echo what Candice said. Or you stole my answer, Candice, the nerve. No, more so for me, the consistency of my spiritual practice as the foundation of everything that I am and everything that I'm not. And just recognizing my community, the people who have brought me to the place, because, we talk about independence all the time, especially as it relates to disability. None of us are independent. We're interdependent. And we have an entire arsenal of people around us that are constantly elevating us and giving us motivation and anything that we literally need to be successful. And I know that's what it was for me.
Thank you, Karen. We've got a question that's been sent in from Barney J. Hi, Barney. You're over in Ireland. Sport for Development and Social Inclusion, Sport Against Racism Ireland. Her question is, and I'm going to ask April, when access and inclusion in team sport is available to children with different abilities, how can we engage girls to play? And any advice on how to reassure parents who are concerned about bumps and bruises?
At the end of the day, kids just want to play. Kids want to play with other kids. They don't want to say, okay, well, these kids have to go over here and play, and these kids have to go over there here and play. And I think in a lot of instances, the parents are afraid almost of allowing their kids to play, maybe because they've endured so much in their lives. I remember doing a camp a few years ago in North Carolina, and one by one, just prior to the camp starting, it was camp for young kids, but one by one, all the parents kept coming up to me and said, hey, my kid can't do this, or my kid just got out the hospital, or my kid just got a new leg, and they can't do this and they can't do that. And so there was a tent in the not so distant. So I said to the parents, I said, hey, all the parents, thank you for coming out. Thank you for bringing your kids. whatever. I said, you see that tent over there with the blue awning over it? And they're like, yes. I said, great. Go over there and sit underneath of it. And if I need you, I'm definitely coming over there to get you. And then all of a sudden I got all the kids together, and we started being excited and riled up or whatever. And I started them doing all these different exercises. And I did not allow the parents to come over there. I wanted the kids to do and play and be with other kids, and not think about what they couldn't do, but instead look around and see what's possible because you see other people doing it. And before the camp was over, even at lunchtime, the parents was like, well, what are we going to do after lunch? My kid doesn't know how to do this. My kid can't do this. My kid can't. Listen, you see that blue tent over there? Please go sit underneath of it, because your kid did all the things you didn't think they could do in the morning, and now they're doing it now in the afternoon. And so at the end of the camp, the kids and the parents just like, kept coming up to me and hugging me. It was like, I never thought that my kid could do that. You never thought they could do it because you never let them do it. You were too busy trying to hold their hand. You were too busy trying to brace their fall. They're kids at the end of the day. Let them go play. Because at the end of the day, kids just want to play with kids. So that's my advice. Let kids play with kids. They're kids. They want to play. Now, should there be some adaptations, or perhaps at some point in time there may need to be some adaptations? Sure, but don't allow the adaptations to come first, as opposed to allowing the kids to just go out there and play first.
That was a brilliant question, Barney, and a great answer, April. I didn't know about your work in the camp, so it was a perfect timing. Very quickly, we've got one last question giveaway to win real unique items from the LA bid. The question's about you, April. You don't know it yet, and I'll let Candice read it out. Candice.
Yes. So, Winter Paralympics has April competed in? Is it 1, 3, or 0?
Brilliant. 1, 3, or 0. We've still got time. We're going to go slightly over because the questions are coming in hard and fast. We're traveling from Ireland all the way to Ohio. Grisha Catalan, who's an MBA candidate at Ohio Dominican University, Columbus, Ohio, USA. Hey, Grisha, I know you won the prize last month, so I hope you're enjoying your Barcelona shirt. What do you think we as viewers or supporters can do to support the Paralympic athletes besides watching and on social media? What is something you want to see from the fans? So how can we make that impact? Karen?
Yeah, Candace said it, educate yourself, learn about the Paralympic movement, learn about disability rights, learn about disability justice, social justice movements, learn about what it is that we're all about. It's very important. And then support however way you feel best to support. We don't want to dictate the support. Show up, learn about us.
Yeah, this is Candace. One of my friends, whenever I'm asking him, how does this work? How does that work? How do you do this? He goes, use your Google.
So educate is the key. We've got another question, which is, again, a very thought-provoking question from South Africa at Digital Artesian. It's from Mafi Toloy. In the future of Paralympics, can able-bodied athletes participate? I guess he's trying to get at an integration of Paralympics and Olympics. What do you say on that?
This is Candace. And so within Paralympic sport, to be able to participate, there's a classification system that is dependent on whether you have a permanent disability. And there's different criterias of that. So yeah, no, probably not, because they have Olympic sport that they can compete in. But in other areas, in road racing, for example, we have an open division, and anyone can come and compete in the open division. In the early days when we were inventing this division, we were creating the road race divisions for wheelchair racing with the race directors and directing them how to do this. We said anybody who wants to participate can. It's in the open division. So great, come. But oftentimes someone who is non-disabled is not going to be able to spend as much time doing the sport and really getting that muscle memory to be able to excel at the sport. But more the merrier was what we thought in road racing. And we still believe it today, that in any of these sports outside of Paralympic competition, where classification is critical, people can come and play and try the sports because the equipment creates a level of equalizing And then it's all about the training and the effort. So outside of Paralympic, yes. Inside of Paralympic, no.
That's your stage. That's your baby. So we've got the final video question, which is from Claire Johnson. She's a regular viewer. So just want to say through this SIGA Wow show, I've met so many people online who are all following, and it's great. Thank you so much for viewing. Claire is, and this is the best name ever, she's the CEO of The Naked Warrior. She's a female empowerment coach. She's a qualified personal trainer. And amongst her mantras are alpha fit female, life on her own terms, and fit, strong, and fierce. And I'd say all of us women here are fit, strong, and fierce. Over to you, Claire, for your video question.
Hey everyone, my name's Claire. I'm also known as the Naked Warrior, and I'm a female empowerment coach. Really excited to hear what all of the ladies have to say about a personal experience that they've had about overcoming an obstacle. What's the language that you've used with yourself? And when you've felt like you've come up against a barrier or a hurdle, how have you dug deep to overcome it to achieve the success that you've had? Thank you.
Brilliant. Who would like to have a go at digging deep to answer Claire's question?
This is Candace. I'm just going to jump really quick. And I don't use the language overcoming because it has an ableistic tone to it. And so for me, I work at dismantling something so that someone who comes after me doesn't have to deal with it. And everybody's not continually trying to jump over these things, that they're gone. So for me, my language has always been that I can do this with my community. And I seek out people to support me and help me and guide me. And then I put that in place. So for me, it's always about bringing in more voices.
Anyone else on jumping in? Can we go to the group frame? Brilliant. April?
I can. So one of the things that I often think about whenever I come up to an obstacle, whether or not I feel like I'm being, my progress is being impeded by an obstacle, I say, I say to myself, April, this is just another train. And you went from train tracks to a hospital bed to a podium in a matter of a couple of years. And so this is no different. You know, your gold medal moment awaits on the other side, but this is just a train. And so even as I've done speaking engagements around the world, coaching clients and even leadership summits, literally that's the thing. It's you know, what train is now in your way? This train is in your way. It's stopping you from doing something. And now figure out a way to get the train out the way. So that's the call on the community, kind of Candace said, because as I laid underneath that train for 17 minutes, I'm actually trapped underneath of a train. And I kept thinking to myself, how can I keep my mind occupied? How can I keep my heart beating? And it was through the help, obviously, of other people that I was freed from the train and was able to go to the hospital and obviously allowed to or permitted, I'll say, to move on with my life almost. But it's, you know, what is that train that's in your way? Identifying, being very forthcoming about the train that's currently in your way. Figure out how you can get the train out the way, and then figure out how you can get to a place of standing on top of the podium or whatever you want to in your life.
Hey, April, that's just put shivers up my spine. And I think, you know, from the literal train to the podium. And also this whole show is about getting the train and getting people to come on our train of inclusion, actually. Get the train that's going to block getting inclusion into sport and sports governance, but also invite people to come on board the train. And we've got an amazing young woman who we are inviting to be a SIGA champion. This is our athlete ambassador piece. Her name is Lucy Shuka. Hopefully her card will come on the screen now. She is, she's got 100 international career titles to her name. She's one of Britain's most successful wheelchair tennis players, which is very apt given that we were in the process of Wimbledon. I know she's involved in that at the moment, which is why she couldn't appear. But well done, Lucy, and thank you for all the work you do on the court and off the court for sport and sport integrity. And now my personal favourite feature of the month, which is the Man of the Month. And I'm very grateful to Karen Korb for giving me the pleasure and honour of introducing me to the one and only Keith Jones, who has been nominated by Karen as our Man of the Month for supporting female leadership in sport You heard his song. It was awesome. At the start of the show, it got us all in the funky mode. And I would like to just summarize some of the conversation I've had with Keith over the last month. He confirms he is a man of many talents, and I can verify that, who was told in his words that he was too crippled to achieve his dreams of becoming a rapper, an athlete, and a teacher. He's absolutely smashed that. He smashed that train in his life. He defied all of those odds. He's father to 3 girls. He's competed in athletics as a teenager and even ran. And he's the co-founder of 2 times Emmy Award winning Crip Hop. And I'd like to cut to a message from Keith and thank him for in supporting our female leaders in sport.
Hello, my name is Keith Jones. First, I want to thank SIGA for the consideration of myself as July Male Champion of the Month. It is beyond an honor and a privilege. And secondly, I want to talk to you about the importance of GERD, gender, race, inclusion, and diversity. It's funny that we have to talk about gender, race, inclusion, and diversity because that is the world. That is the world that we live in. We are made up of multifaceted humans on the spectrum of humanity. The importance of GERD is that it also shows how much work we need to do in terms of understanding people's talents, potentials, access to the ability to compete at the highest level. It is important that regardless of where you are, whether it be Europe, Africa, Asia, South, Central, or North America, that your humanity is respected, that your identity as you see it is respected. That is the importance of GERD. It is making sure that the whole human being in their pursuit of the highest level of competition can be truly themselves in order to obtain their most optimal performance. We're in 2021. We are still dealing with COVID. We're still coming out of a global pandemic. But what this does afford us is the opportunity to look at each other and say, I see your humanity. I see how you define yourself. I respect and appreciate the way you move through your life, much as I hope you respect and appreciate the way I move through mine. And as a person with a disability, those things are key. It is very difficult to try to move to a place in the world where everybody considers they have an idea of your skill set, your talent, and your ability to compete. So again, it is a great honor to be considered a Male Champion of the Month for July and to support all of the work that GERD has done. Again, gender, race, inclusion, and diversity are critically important, especially focusing on making sure that we can get to the point to acknowledge everyone's whole humanity as a part of taking on one part of their identity. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Keith. And I think to quote you, GRID is the world, gender, race, inclusion, and diversity. There's no room for exceptions. Before we close, I'm going to announce the winners of our competitions. We've got Lauren Camperman, who's a PhD candidate from Durham University. That she's winning the jacket, Karen, so I will connect you in due course. And the second winner is Matthew Olson, who's an executive director and CEO, and we will be sending the LA bid items, which are unique. They can't be sold, I've been told. Candice will be sending them to you. I'd like to thank from the bottom of my heart, Candice, April, and Karen for opening my eyes today, for elusifying and explaining disability, but also more importantly, to explain the solutions that we can all aboard the train for inclusion. And I'm going to end this third episode asking our viewers a simple thing, which is keep it real. Get outside your own bias as we play out to the powerful lyrical rhymes of Mr. Keith Joseph, who is, as he says, even in his wheelchair, the last man standing. And we're going to go to the rising phoenix official lyric video from Netflix, and hopefully that will play out. It's one of the most powerful videos I've seen to date.
There's a young boy walking through obstacles, cut up from all the surgery, prosthetic picture perjury, telling me I'm normal, but normal they never really made me see. They always painted me, discriminated but levitated through all the hated scenes. So I redrew how they made it seem. But that's what you feel around vultures and all the fatal schemes. They wanna label me a cripple, that's the way it seems. Take away my right to pursue a normal life and live.
Indeed, for me, I must proceed and shine bright like the sun. Even though I know the darkness will come, it's all temporary. I can be legendary, cause I will never stop believing in me. It doesn't matter what you think I should be. See, I am what I am, I'm the truth. I'm disabled, I'm amazing, understand. Don't you ever underrate me, cause I got a second chance and I choose to be the greatest in whatever the plan is. All my life, right? I ignite life. A kaboom when I step in the room, so please don't get distracted. Yes, my limbs are fractured, still I rise from the ashes. I'm a rising phoenix, I rise above you. I'm a rising phoenix, I rise above you.
On your markets at the pistols pop, I'm out the block to hit the ground running. No late days of sun, but the storm, the human being can born to do it. That's why I be so slow while I do this underneath the ditch. Watching how I keep it moving. Use it, you lack of intuition. Presuming my predictions in the BS. 5 and 8 arise, transform the light before the eyes and into the sky. They ask you for a while, but Phoenix rise.
Lead with example and do everything in life I see. A simple thing like riding a bike, we all alike. How is that enlightening me? It's so much fighting me, cause my superpower, it makes me different, that's lightening me. Wait, how many obstacles I gotta break? How many fights I gotta face? Just to make you feel my fate. I shake, then I break down. Yeah, but I take all the weight down.
I'm a rising phoenix, I rise above you. I'm a rising phoenix, I rise above you. People make fun of what they don't understand. Look at me cause I'm different and can't do what they can. But belittle me you won't, because I am what I am. I am amazing, a different pill in which your brain cannot cram. I'm different. Often inspired by pain, inflicted by the inhumane, with hearts as black as the grain. My disability is silent, but my bottled up rage got me running from my dreams 100 miles with one leg. So how dare you try to remind me that I don't fit into your perception? How dare you define me? I'm beyond what you see as perfection. I'm a rising phoenix, I rise above